Okay, today we have Jacqueline Boone, and my video is not on because I'm having some Wi-Fi connectivity issues here in Alaska today. But welcome, Jackie. Jacqueline Boone is a digital marketing consultant, writer, and the creator of 6 Months to Live, a soon-to-be online publication and web series that is passionately committed to empowering people to create lives and businesses that make a huge impact in the world. Again, welcome, Jacqueline. You go by
Thank
Jacqueline or
you. Thank you so
Jackie?
much for having me, Libby.
Yeah, this is exciting. We go way back. So,
I know. It was a Tuesday. It's amazing.
yeah, from our first course together back in San Francisco, while we were living and working from
Yes.
anywhere and pursuing our dreams. Um, there we go. So Jacqueline, do you go by Jacqueline or Jackie? Which one should we call you?
You can call me Jackie. We go way back.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, so Jackie, tell me about when we met. We talked about living and working from anywhere, and I know since then you've taken your life on a huge adventure, and at the time you were working in the corporate world. So tell me about your first steps that you took to living and working from anywhere.
Well, actually, Libby, you were a huge inspiration for me. So when we met at a Skillshare class, and I was just starting to pursue, it was actually a Skillshare class about how to teach Skillshare classes. And I had been toying with the idea of starting to teach people how to build a blog since 6 Months to Live has been going now for 5 years. And had raised money for a Kickstarter show to do a web series, and it's had thousands of views and visits and has a great global community. So I was starting to teach people about how to do that for themselves, and I was also doing marketing in the corporate world and how to do social media. And when we met, I was so fascinated and inspired by what you were doing because I was toying with the notion of leaving corporate or doing my own thing. And at the time, I was sort of feeling out of alignment because 6 Months to Live is all about living the life you really want and going after your dreams. And I no longer felt that I was doing that. So I felt kind of out of integrity about that. So when I met you, it was a huge catalyst and confirmation that it was possible because I had lived in China for 3 years and traveled extensively globally and was doing international M&A in China and South America. And so I was already used to the living, working anywhere piece of it because I was remote working for a New York company in San Francisco. But the idea of entrepreneurship was completely new, and it's something I hadn't really considered in a serious way. So when I met you, it was a confirmation that it was possible. So it was very exciting.
Well, thank you first of all for the big compliment because I was doing a little dance over here. You can't see me, so but thank you. Honestly, that's very very nice. But I remember you saying that you. It's interesting that you were in a point when you were just kind of transitioning out and not feeling in alignment with what you really wanted. I think a lot of people can relate with that. Tell me about your
Yeah.
experience living in China.
Yeah, so my I moved to China right after I graduated from Boston University, and it was a real big choice point in my life because up until graduation, I had done all the things you're supposed to do. I was an honor roll student and graduated with honors and had the 4 internships and had worked at In Style magazine in New York the summer at a marketing internship the summer before I was to graduate. And the real shifting moment was when I went on this 15-day trip to Israel with about 30 people, and I just saw what was going on and the breakdowns in communication between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and just the difficulties. And I thought, I was so naive. I thought I had seen a thing or two because I had been to Europe, and lived in Spain. And so going there really opened my eyes to how ignorant I was about the world and how I really didn't know anything. And so when the opportunity came to work for a nonprofit called World Teach and volunteer in China, in a very rural part of China, I was the only white girl in the town, I I seized the opportunity because I decided, you know what, like this speaks to my heart and this is something I really want to do. And the path of, moving to New York and working up the corporate ladder, that's a very clear path and I know I can do it. I've been raised for that, but what would this other path be, if I really went for making a difference and doing what I really wanted to do? So that was what brought me over to China the first year. And I did not speak Mandarin when I moved there, so it was a huge learning curve. And after the first year, I decided that if I really wanted to understand China, I needed to be there more than a year in a very rural part. It'd be like going to Christmasville, Georgia, and coming back and be like, I know the US. So I decided to move to Hangzhou, which is 2 hours from Shanghai. And I worked at a technology university there. And then I also worked for Cisco and Bell Power and some language centers and sort of ran my own business my third year without even realizing it. And then I also worked for the Beijing Olympics for Aramark in Beijing in 2008, that summer in between.
Wow, so it sounds like just by taking the leap and deciding to go, a lot of opportunities came your way while you were there.
Yes, I'm a huge, huge believer in following your heart and really having a clear vision. I know that we've talked about that a lot and that you talk about that on LWA about being clear and taking the leap. The same thing happened when I moved to San Francisco. I actually moved back from China after 3 years and decided I really wanted to go out to San Francisco. But it was 2009, it was the recession. I didn't know anyone out there. And 6 months to live started because someone asked me, what would you do if you had 6 months to live?
Yeah, actually,
And
before you get into that story, that's actually something I wanted to ask you. So there's a couple different things in here. So going to China, you spent
sure.
3 years in China. At that time, you experienced
Yes.
lots of different changes. What, first of all, what made you decide to leave China to go to San Francisco?
Again, it was kind of I very much live by sort of what feels right in my gut and
Hmm.
going after your visions and your desires. I think that's really important. And I think too many people dismiss it. But I think when you're really listening to your heart and not in a, like a sappy woo woo, like, oh, kumbaya way, but in a genuine, like, this is what every fiber in my being is telling me that I want to do. And it doesn't make any sense. That's when magic happens. And I've seen it time and time again when you follow that feeling, things magically show up and appear. So for me, it was coming to 3 years, and it was I was had just turned no, I was 25, and so it was at that stage where if I stayed longer in China, it was going to be more and more difficult to repatriate and to go back to the States. And I was also I had taught, I had managed a team of over 100 in Mandarin because I did learn Mandarin. I had done all these different things, but I wasn't quite ready to be a permanent expat. So that was another reason. It was kind of head and heart. I think it's important to have both.
That's great. I like what you said about when the magic happens. I feel the same. I've experienced that as well. So let me ask you, when you were
Sure.
over there, did you said you learned Mandarin, and where did you live? How did you settle in? How did you start getting learn to learn the language?
So my first year, World Teach provided housing on the campus. So I had an apartment, a foreign teacher's apartment, and something I started to do, I love this, is I started carrying around moleskins. I listened to Pimsleur, I listened to Chinese Pod, I started doing a lot of language exchanges. Language exchanges are a great way to get in front of someone, and the sole purpose is to help each other learn a language. Just a little tip on the language exchanges: no matter what culture it is, you want to find someone who is going to really adhere to that hour of time. So generally how language exchange works is you have an hour where you speak the language that you're wanting to learn, and then you have an hour where they speak the language that they're wanting to learn. So when I lived in Spain, I learned about this and did a lot of intercambios, which is exchanges. And so that helped my Spanish so much faster than if I had just, been listening to Pimsleur or doing things. But it's really important to have a combination. In China, I also did, so I carried around a moleskin. I did a ton of language exchanges. I put myself in situations where I would have to speak Mandarin. So where people did not speak any English, and just learning how to be comfortable in being uncomfortable. And I think travel is the best training for entrepreneurship there is, because buses don't come all the time when they're scheduled when you're in, Costa Rica or Nicaragua or wherever, or
Right.
rural Hunan province. And It's the same in entrepreneurship. Sometimes the bus doesn't come. Sometimes your plans don't work out the way you thought it was. So it trains you to be comfortable in discomfort, and it also trains you to think on your feet and to be very clear about, well, so what if the bus didn't come? My goal is still to get to Beijing, so I'll take a plane instead. And that kind of thinking is imperative in entrepreneurship.
That's a fantastic connection that you just made, and not the first time I've heard that from other people, and it's very true. The more you can put yourself in unknown, the better off you can succeed. So, overcome obstacles, I should say. So, tell me about. Let's talk about 6 months to live then. So, where were you? You were in San Francisco at the time, and somebody approached
I
you.
was in Atlanta on my mom's couch looking for jobs. When, sometimes, and that's the thing, sometimes when you follow your heart in the interim piece, that it's not always so easy. So, my gut told me it's time to come back to the US. It's time to, I worked on a ranch in Montana. That was one of my dreams. So I did that first. And then I was on my mom's couch. And so I was looking for work and I was feeling really depressed. I'm like, how did I go from this amazing life in China where even on the bad days, I felt like I was making a difference and doing something and challenging myself and always learning, to being back in Atlanta, looking for jobs, feeling really sorry about myself. So when she asked me that question, it really resonated with me. And I thought to myself, like, why does life only have to be exciting when you travel? Why can't I bring that back into my home life or into, my own culture, this idea of I'll never get this day again. And we often, whether we're young or older or whatever, we only really examine life when sort of shit hits the fan. But it's so important to acknowledge that, hey, you only get this life once. So do what you're really here to do and do what you're really excited about doing. Don't wait. Because I know so many people, and that was one of the biggest kickers for me about taking action now. It's because so many people, they had dreams and they let them go. And then before they knew it, they're 50. It's like, well, I don't want to wait till I'm 50 to realize I didn't live my dreams. So I decided to do a life experiment. 6 months of living, not as if I was going to die in 6 months, but really going for it, as if having this sort of urgency and this excitement about life. And I started sharing it on a blog and people started paying attention. I moved to San Francisco because I was like, this is my dream. I got to go for it. I was reading The Alchemist.
Great book.
And moved to San Francisco with a little over $1,000, New Year's Eve, 4 bags, had a place to live for a month, and just hit the pavement. It was like, this is where I want to be, universe. Like, please help a sister out. I was down to 2 meals at the end. I was taking care of a black lab chow mix named Sparky in this like really tiny room so that I could afford to stay a little longer to go through the interview process for the job that I ultimately got. And when I finally got my job, I had $200 left in my bank account. So it's kind of a close call, but I got my dream job. It was an amazing, it came in this is why I'm talking about the magic. And I know that you have experiences like this, Libby, where I got a job working directly for the CEO of a New York-based company managing international strategic partnerships. So basically, I was going around China, South America, working on my languages in a business format, making partnerships. So that was amazing. Absolutely loved it.
That is incredible, and it just echoes your story. Echoes what you just said. Is if you just take the risks and take the chances and believe that things are going to work out, and do. I heard a lot of sacrificing in there as well. I think a lot of people are scared. They're like, I don't want to live on mom's couch, and I don't want to have 2 meals left. I mean, and it sounds to me like, I mean, what were those times like? Did it sound like it was scary, difficult?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think the scariest part about it, no matter how many times I've made these leaps or made these sacrifices, the scariest part is you always wonder, like, is it going to work out this time? Is it going to really be okay? And I wish I could tell you that that leaves with how many times I've done it. I mean, when I left San Francisco after and decided to go full time with my job shortly after meeting you, I decided that the one thing in the world I really wanted to do was sail in South America, and I had never been on a sailboat. So I learned how to sail, gave everything away. Long, very long story short, 2 months later, was crewing for a skipper in Mexico. It was one of the best experiences of my life. But it takes, and that's again back to entrepreneurship. It takes that your dream, your vision, what you want in your heart of hearts is so compelling. It's so important that you don't care if you have to take a bus to get there, if you have to take a plane, if you have to swim. And it takes that kind of dedication. And that's really what separates the women from the girls.
That's right. And you do a lot actually, don't you, for women? Like
I
you're
do.
working on a
Mhm.
trip right now, is that right? Is that
Yeah, I am. So, one of the things that I noticed in my travels, because I do a lot of solo travel, and I know you do too. One of the things I noticed is that women, there's a lot of taboos about women traveling on their own, and especially when you get sort of in your late 20s, mid to late 20s, and your 30s, there's sort of this gap if you're a single woman or you want to even, you're married, but you want to travel alone. So I saw this in Europe when I was there because I went to 7 countries in 3 weeks, all on my own, and met with people along the way. You always meet with people, but I just saw this really big gap. There was either staying at a hostel, which felt a little old. I felt a little old to just be in a hostel, or going to these nice. I was like, oh, I'm going to treat myself. I'm going to go to a 5-star hotel in Malta. And I was the only young person there. It was a bunch of people who were married and romantic. And I was like, well, I'm eating my lobster. I'm like, well, this is fun. There's no one to talk to. And I feel completely out of place. So I wanted to create something that would give women this place of having an expedition, an adventure. So that I'm creating something that I am calling an expedition. And it's a way for women to come together, but to travel in a really compelling and adventurous and exciting way. I'm not into the tour thing, but that allows women to connect and also allows them to explore. So I'm integrating some of the lessons of entrepreneurship with actually teaching women, how to go out and connect, how to see even your target market by being aware. And because really what business is all about, it's about understanding people and having the right conversations with the right people and having an exchange around that.
Oh, that's really interesting. I think it's, being in a similar situation. I've definitely experienced staying at five-star hotels or traveling in hostels or being by myself. But tell me a little bit more about how when you go to a place, 7 countries in 3 weeks, that's all on your own. That's awesome. You,
It
you,
was pretty crazy. It was fun, but it was pretty crazy.
You have so many bucket list items, and I want to ask you about some of the things that you've done. But also, a lot of people are afraid to travel, and especially there's taboos around women. But there's also, women have to take a few more precautions, generally speaking. And so, what do you do when you get to a place? You said there's people everywhere, or you always meet people. So tell us how you've met people and how that happens.
Sure. Well, one of the best ways is just putting yourself in situations where you are able to meet people. So, one of the downsides of being at a nicer hotel is that you're not going to have the same sort of opportunities unless they have, like a yoga class that you can go to. That's why one of the reasons I do like hostels is because people are open to meeting people. I do a lot of co-working. I teach at a lot of co-working spaces around the US. So when I was in Prague, I met someone at a wedding in Slovakia who told me about, the hub location. He works for the hub, is where we actually met. We met at the hub.
Oh, that's
So
right.
in San Francisco.
That's right.
So I went to the hub in Prague and connected with a lot of people there. I also made sure to there's meetup groups if you're traveling in the US. There's also meetup groups abroad. Just putting yourself in situations and not being afraid to start conversations with people. So I love travel because you're in a much bigger state of openness generally, especially if you're traveling alone, and you have more incentive to talk to strangers. And of course, use your intuition. If someone looks really sketchy, it's not like, oh, now's the time to have a conversation. Probably walk the other way. But I mean, in the situation in Gozo, which is an island in Malta, I was at the beach and I was trying to figure out the bus system and I was a little confused and this guy in this little red car who's an Australian dude who's lived in Malta for a really long time, he offered to give me a ride to the next temple and you use your gut and you're like, "Okay." So he gave me a ride because that stuff happens all the time when you travel. If you're open to it and if you start having conversations, or when I got to Edinburgh, because I literally went from Malta to Scotland, which was pretty crazy with one bag. So because I like to pack light, and so it was very different atmosphere and environment. But I landed and I stayed at a guest house, so like a bed and breakfast, because that's really popular in the UK. And the guy that was working the desk or whatever, he's from Nepal. And so he was watching Big Bang Theory when I came back from my fish and chips. So I sat down and had a conversation with him and talked about what he was doing. It's really helpful to ask your community who knows people in the area. I met in Edinburgh. I went with a girl that I knew from meeting on her on Craigslist originally in San Francisco, and she lived in Edinburgh. So I stayed with her a night, and we went out to this live music thing and sat next to an American guy who's a musician. You just start these conversations, and so he invited me over for dinner with a bunch of his roommates, and there's a French guy and Italians, and so it works like that, and everyone has connections, and the travel community is one of the kindest, most open, most giving, generous community I've ever been part of. It's a very reciprocal community, and it's very much I scratch your back, you scratch mine. So it's important that you are aware of that and that always pay it forward.
That's great. That's great advice. And it also sounds like it seems like it just kept running on and ongoing, and this person and that person. I mean, you made so many connections. And what you said is that if you're open to it, so when somebody invites you to dinner, you said yes. When somebody offered to give you a ride and he wasn't sketchy, you said yes. And I mean, you seem like a very outgoing person. And have you always been that way? Or for people who might be shy,
Mhm.
I think you already gave some great advice, which is how to be open, but,
Mhm.
and how to connect to certain groups. But I guess what could somebody who's, maybe I'm being redundant, but, for a shy person, some
Yeah,
advice.
no, that's a good question. I actually, believe it or not, was a pretty shy kid. So,
No, I don't believe it. No.
it's
Just kidding.
true. So I was, when I was pretty young, I was pretty shy. I was the tallest girl in the grade. I had acne before everyone else. So I always felt like an outsider. And I always felt like I didn't quite fit in. And so what I really most wanted in the first kind of 14 years of my life was to fit in. And so I remember my babysitter as a kid was very outgoing, and she would encourage me. I was so embarrassed to go up to someone and ask if they wanted to be friends. I was like, no, I can't do that. Like, what if they would reject me, or what if they would say like, don't talk to me anymore, you're horrible, or whatever. And she really encouraged me, said, just go up to someone at the pool. I mean, I was about 6, and just ask them if they want to be friends. And so I literally went up to this girl, I'll never
Aw.
remember. And I just said, "Hi, I'm Jackie. Want to be friends?"
Aw.
And she said, "Okay, let's go play." And I was like, "Okay." And so I think that showed me at a very young age that even though there will always be that risk of people not reciprocating it. And it's not to say that every person I start a conversation with wants to talk back to me. So I can't tell you how many times I've had this situation where I start talking to someone and they don't respond because they don't hear me or whatever. And I'm like, okay, see you later. So it, with that discomfort in being in a travel environment or entrepreneurship or whatever it is, it also means taking the risk that you're not going to be that you'll be rejected, or that you won't be responded to. I mean, I think we've all had that situation, but the reward is so much greater. And so at this point, I've been so deeply uncomfortable so many times that I mean, nothing is more uncomfortable than you're literally the only white girl on a bus in rural China, and there's a chicken pooping and people smoking, and sunflower seeds are like, that is very uncomfortable for like, a girl that grew up in suburban Atlanta.
That's
But
great.
you you have those situations, and travel makes you see that we're actually all just really alike. And we all have the same desires, more or less. We want to be happy. We want to be loved. We want to have the same things. And so I approach it as a writer because everything is an experience. So if I have someone that totally shuts me down or doesn't want to have anything to do with me or thinks I'm a freak or whatever, it's an experience, and it also sort of builds your self-confidence. But again, the rewards are so much better because you do have the experiences where people take you in, and I can't tell you how many times I could cry about it because it's been so amazing to see the goodness of humanity, whether it's someone on the side of the road, like selling, there's something in China called dumping, which is like it's like a flat pancake with egg in it, or in Costa Rica, and just be willing to be open and friendly. I mean, almost no one rejects someone who's smiling and open. And also, if you, when in doubt, I say play the Weigo Lao card.
The
Weigo
what
Lao
card?
is a
Oh,
slang
okay.
term in this tiny town I lived in, Ninyuan, for foreigner. So when in doubt, just play the foreigner card. Like, you don't know what to do, and you're not expected to know what to do. And in a lot of countries, you'll very clearly stand out. So don't be afraid to look stupid and to be like, I don't know where I'm going, because actually people will be much more likely to help you and to open up dialogue with you.
I love this the visual of the bus with the chicken, and that's fantastic. And I almost think I think it's great. I think people should challenge themselves to take even just one action. Go up to someone and say, "Hey, do you want to be my friend?" Or maybe not that one, but something like, "Hey, do you know where the bus is?" Something that gets you, take. So I mean, I would encourage and challenge everybody just to take that one little thing and try it. And if
Yeah,
you
instead
get
of using Yelp, actually ask someone sitting next to you, hey, do you know
right.
of a good restaurant around here?
Right, right. And try it 5 times and see how many people reject you. And I think you'll be surprised. And that feeling, like you said, the reward, I think it becomes addictive, where you're like, you overcome that challenge and it feels so good that you just want to keep doing it.
Well, it's an amazing experience to grow. And I think travel, entrepreneurship, being willing, when I had an important meeting yesterday, and with a company that I want to do work with, and I felt really nervous. But I had that. There's a difference between feeling that excited, nervous, like you're
Hmm.
afraid, but you're also like, oh my gosh. It's a good excited, nervous. And that to me characterizes and encapsulates Eleanor Roosevelt's quote, do one thing every day that scares you. And to me, that feeling's like I'm out of my comfort zone and I'm alive. And that feeling of aliveness is often being willing to take risks because that's how you grow and change. And let's say that, there's all those videos out there about not asking the woman that you think is attractive at the coffee shop for something. I recently had a situation where a guy, um, I met this guy at a bar or whatever, and he was with a group of friends, and had a nice conversation, and I thought he was a great guy, but I wasn't interested in that way. But he like followed me to the bathroom, and he's like, hey Jackie, just wanted to ask you, would you be up for frozen yogurt sometime? And I'm like, can I go to the bathroom first? So when I
What not to do? Yeah.
So when I got out of the bathroom, he was like waiting very patiently for me on a stack of chairs. And he said, "So do I get an answer?" And I said, "Yes, so I would love to go to a frozen yogurt as friends, because I think it's important to be honest with people, but good for him. Like I really had a lot of respect for him, even if it wasn't the suavest thing or whatever. Frozen yogurt, that's really nice. I like some frozen yogurt."
He's persistent.
So
He's got
I
courage. You
thought
got
it
to
was
give him
great
credit.
that
Yeah.
he took the chance. And I think that's really important because you're going to get rejected. Did I tell you about the experiment I did, the 21 days of rejection
I
therapy?
did. I remember that on your blog. I remember reading about it a little bit. Yep.
Yeah. So it's really easy. I didn't create rejection therapy, but it's you have to be told no at least once every day. And I did that almost immediately after I met you, Libby, actually, because I realized I needed an extra little fire under my you know what to get going. And so one of the things that was holding me back was fear of rejection. I was so surprised at how little I got rejected. I had to work to get told no, and that was really
Really?
surprising. Hmm.
I think it's interesting that this is actually key. I felt like we were going off tangent, but really, I think this is a good thing to focus on is that the fear of rejection and the fear, just fear in general, is what stops a lot of people
Hmm.
from going. And you say, I have this obligation, I have that obligation. But if you can put yourself in a situation where you can get rejected, I mean, this rejection therapy, do we find this on your blog, 6 months to live me?
Yeah, yeah. I'll include the link for you
Excellent.
when you publish it.
Okay, I think that's great. I mean, people can follow this plan of rejection and kind of get unstuck from your current situation and start getting yourself used to being in this situation of unfamiliarity that you can start to prepare yourself to go on a trip anyway. Speaking of preparing to go on a trip, you talked about, jumping from here to there. How much planning do you actually do ahead of time? So like when you went to Scotland, I think you mentioned Scotland before. And what are your like thinking of like the LWA criteria, like what are the things that you absolutely have to have planned, like minimum viable planning ahead of time before you go on a trip?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. This particular trip, the seven countries in 3 weeks, was very impromptu. So I'll talk a little bit about exactly the tools I used and what I did and how I made my decisions. I think in general, when you're planning a trip, it's really the most important thing is that you have bookends and you're sort of clear about. So I knew I was flying into Vienna and I knew I was flying out of Dublin. So for sure I was going to Austria and for sure I was going to Ireland. And I also knew that I was going to Slovakia because my friends were getting married. So I like to plan the first 3 days, 3 or 4, because I like to know, especially that first day, where I'm landing, where I'm sleeping, and how I'm getting there. Because when you're dealing with jet lag and different languages and cultures and things like that, it's one more thing to worry about when you land and you have to figure out your hotel. That's just not fun. And also to choose somewhere, I like to choose somewhere a little nicer on my first night so that I'm sleeping well, that I get over the jet lag easily, and so that I can hit the ground running. And so I do some research on that before. With this particular trip, because I have traveled so much, I decided to do something kind of different and sort of go by just a completely like heart-based, I want to go here, so now I'm going to go here trip. So how it worked was I went to Vienna, I met some friends there, so I had a place to stay and had friends that spoke German. And then I went to, took a train to Slovakia, and then I had friends pick me up from the train to go to the wedding, and then met a lot of people, and then through that decided to go to Prague because there were people driving back to Prague. And Czech Republic and Slovakia are very close. They used to be united. So I got a ride to Prague, booked the ticket last minute. I looked at Airbnb, so that's a great way. Also use booking.com a lot. I can't remember the name of it now. I'll look it up, but there's like a hot wire, but it's a UK base. So in Europe, that works really well. So using some of those use Travelocity, got a great deal on a very nice hotel in Prague for like $90 a night or $100 a night, which was really good. It was a very nice hotel. It was central in the city.
So
And
when
then just using and leveraging it and then planning out as I went.
Okay, so I think it's interesting you say that the plan the first 3 to 4 days, get a nice place to stay on the first night so you can get over your jet lag, hit the ground running. What else do you do in those 3 to 4 days? Like, how do you orient yourself before you decide to go to Prague, before you decide to book the ticket? I mean, what are you doing in the city to kind of prepare yourself? I mean, because you're working as you're going along, right? Which we're going to get into in a minute, like entrepreneurship. And so, what else do you need in those first 3 to 4 days to orient yourself and to keep working?
The biggest thing again is like sleep and getting over your jet lag because it's very hard to orient yourself anywhere if you're not well rested and you're not well fed. So it seems almost kind of like superfluous or oh don't worry about where you're sleeping or what you're eating, but it's really important that you're fueling yourself and taking care of yourself. The other thing that I do is that I arrange my client calls and my work that, so the calls that I need to be there for in person, like a Skype, I arrange them all on one day. So I know, for example, that I'll have 5 Skype calls on a Thursday, or maybe it's 2 days. So I make sure that I'm in a place that I can check out the internet and then I can vet it first. And I found out the hard way that it's not always the nice hotels that have the best internet. So I was supposed to have a client call in Inverness, which was my last stop before going up to the Isle of Skye in Scotland. And the internet ended up being terrible, and it was a nice hotel. It was an expensive hotel, so I was pretty surprised about that. Whereas I booked a farmhouse in Gozo, which was a beautiful farmhouse and had a pool, and actually that was where it had the best internet. So you just want to be in situations where you have time to check that kind of stuff out because it is your business, and you want it to be an appealing thing that, hey, my I'm talking with my client call or whatever while I'm on the road, and that's exciting, versus you have Skype issues and you're not able to get your work done because that doesn't look good to your clients, and it's not good for business.
And even when you do check the internet connection, like I did yesterday for this shop, you still never know. But
Yes. So sometimes you have issues, and
true,
most people are kind about that, and so it's having backup plans.
yeah,
It's what I was saying about having, sometimes the bus doesn't come, so where the plane
right,
is going to be doing.
right.
So especially if it's a client call, carry a what's the I'm blanking out on the thing that you carry, the website thing, the
That you
internet.
carry?
It's a
Oh,
USB.
clear Wi-Fi or a USB
No, it's
hotspot?
yeah, a hotspot, or it's not VCN. I can't remember the name of it right now.
That's all right. So
But a lot of people,
carry something with you as backup. Is that kind of what you're saying? Yeah,
yes.
good point.
Make sure that your computer is charged. And then also, worst case scenario, you could use Skype on your phone. There's a lot of Wi-Fi. Again, it depends on where you are. So if you're in Europe, there's a lot of Wi-Fi everywhere. So you can use Skype through Wi-Fi or Viber or something like that. Just cross your T's, dot your I's as most as you can, and plan for it as best you can.
Great. So, what are some of my takeaways from you so far are creating urgency, like you did with 6 months to live. You created a 6 month plan. When you go to you went through rejection therapy so you could prepare yourself to go down this road of travel. When you travel, you create these bookends and you give yourself 3 to 4 days to kind of get to a place. And it sounds like you also have a bucket list. I wrote that down as well, of things that you wanted to do in that 6 month period. First of all, I want to talk, we could talk probably all day about 6 months to live and just the bucket list. And I want to hear some of those stories, not only intertwined, but we can pull a couple of them out. And I think, people could definitely check out 6monthsoflive.me. Great stories. You're a great storyteller. But
Oh,
let's
thank
talk.
you.
Let's talk a little bit about entrepreneurship. So you started 6 months to live. I know you were teaching courses on how to start a blog and how to get sponsors, and you literally, the last time I saw you, we saw each other in San Francisco at the hub, and then the next thing I knew, you were traveling the world and making money from your blog. So let's dig into that for a minute. Tell us about how
Yeah.
you, yeah. Tell us about your blog.
So the blog started, I guess, almost 5 years ago, and I raised money for a Kickstarter. And so when I was starting my own business, it really came down to, okay, how do I make money from doing this? Are you still there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, just
Did
making
it freeze?
sure.
I have some
hence,
background noise. Sorry.
hence the trouble. So for me, it was
Living
when
the
you're
brand.
first starting a business, it's being really clear on creating sustainable revenue and creating your ideal client. So making very sure that you're clear about who you're marketing to, what you're doing, how to do that. So I did take some courses in the beginning, and some of it was helpful and some of it wasn't. But learning about how to have, I think the biggest ramp up for entrepreneurs moving from corporate is when you work in corporate, you are in, sort of your cubicle or your office, or your corner desk or whatever. And it doesn't matter how hard or little you work, you still get a paycheck every week or every month or whatever the cycle is. In entrepreneurship, that's not how it works. So you are constantly selling and needing to bring in revenue for your business. That's really important so that you can have paychecks. So when you can figure out what is it that I do really well and what are different ways that I can serve my clients and then have different revenue streams for how to do that. So the blog is one revenue stream. So now that it's turning into an online publication, they'll be bringing on, sponsors and affiliate marketing and different things with that. And then I also do consulting with entrepreneurs and startups about how to leverage the digital marketing strategy and how to really start these conversations online that lead to business
Okay,
in
but
an
just backing,
authentic and genuine way that's not, spammy and
yeah,
noise.
not to cut you off, but we did briefly mention that before, and you just breezed over it. But so you started out having a blog, and that's been around for about 5 years, and now you're turning it into an online publication. Before we get into online publication, I just want to talk about what are the first steps if somebody's looking to maybe you already have a blog or maybe you're looking to start with a blog, but how I think a key question is here, how do you have a blog that's generating revenue? I think you're right. First question is, how do I make money? How can I make this sustainable? How do you do that? How do you create a blog that generates revenue while you're traveling? And then I want to really dive into what made you change to the online publication and
Mm-hmm.
what that is and
Mm-hmm.
what it looks like. But what was it like for you first steps? Because before, up to this point, it's always been kind of your blog, and you've
Mm-hmm.
been writing. You're a great writer, and you've been getting sponsorships. And what does that look like?
Yeah, so the sponsorships has actually been a very small percentage of the revenue because I decided, but there's kind of a couple ways to go about it. So if you're the most important thing with your blog or whatever with your company is having a clear voice and narrative to the people that you're wanting to serve and help. And then you create opportunities to help them, and those are your different offerings that you can then have. So one of the reasons why my business was able to be successful pretty quickly was that I had an audience and I had people that knew me and I had people that were asking me questions. The other thing that I think is very important is I have never created any offering up to this point that hasn't been asked for by my community or where I didn't see a need. So I see a lot of entrepreneurs doing this thing like, oh, this is an amazing idea. Like, this would be so great. And then they go to their audience with it, or they build this tech startup, or they do it, and then there's crickets. But when you have an audience that is feeding you, hey, Jackie, how are you able to travel around the world? Oh, I'll create a class around that, and I'll create an opportunity for them to learn that knowledge. Or, hey, Jackie, how do you run your blog? That's why I created the class. Or, hey, Jackie, how do you use social media? I mean, you're getting sort of the point. And so creating opportunities that are leveraging your time and also creating passive income for you, but that are helping people, because that's really what I'm all about, is helping people do what they really want to do and live their best life, because life is really short. So you might as well live the one you really want to live.
Right. So you said create income opportunities based on the conversation. Don't just go out there and wing it. Create it based on what the feedback is and what
Mhm.
where people need help and make meet in the middle there and create content, courses, etc., products around that, and then monetize that way. And that's how you're able to continue to get paid and try. I mean, how are you collecting revenues from your clients and your courses?
So I do everything online, almost everything. So I teach live classes, but I also do live classes through Google Hangout or through GoToWebinar, or there's a bunch of different services. And then for the time being, because it's easier, I just use PayPal. So
Gotcha.
I have subscriptions that I have set up, and I also have, invoices, and I bill ahead of time because I don't like invoice chasing. I don't think anyone likes that, but I decided day one in my business that that was what worked for me.
Okay.
So that's really important too.
How do you plan your day when you're traveling? Like, what does your day look like? And I mean, you're obviously running a Google Hangout. You need to find the
Mhm.
hotel farm side with the pool versus the fancy hotel for Wi-Fi. Like, what is
I know
that?
it's kind of ironic. I didn't expect that.
Hey, I think everybody would like that, prefer that, or at least I would. Sorry. Yeah. So, what does your day look like? How do you plan? you talked a little bit earlier about batching your calls together.
Mhm.
Um, Tell us more about your day. What's the first thing you do, like when you wake up and prepare for your day?
The first thing I do as part of every day, and I started this ritual pretty recently, and I remember you asking sort of in the pre-questions what was sort of the one tidbit you want to take away with people. I think when you get into business, people get into it because they really love and they want to serve and they want to help, which is great. But it's so important that you focus on your vision and why you're doing everything that you're doing, and that you're working on things you really love to do, because otherwise you're going to burn out. So that's why it's so important that you are taking care of your body. It's so important that you do take some time off every now and then. Chris Gullibaloo talks about he takes one day off. I do my very best to take one day off, or take, half days, or to really listen to what's going on. So I actually start every day with looking at my Pinterest vision board. So that's one of the ways that I found that's really good. Visuals are very compelling for me. So I have a private board on my Pinterest that shows everything I'm working towards, everything that I'm wanting to create and experience in my life. And I also read, the first email I read is the Tut Universe emails. Have you subscribed to that?
I haven't heard of it. What's it called? The Tut.
It's called Tut, T-U-T, and it's all about the universe, and it's kind of messages from the universe to people.
Okay.
So it's amazing. I'll include that link in the follow up. But I start with those emails because it reminds me there's something sort of bigger than me, and that there's something, that my dream and that my business is bigger than just me or just whatever. So I start my day off that way, and I always say set yourself up for success. So for me, what works best is having sort of the bookends. So having live conversations with clients, but spacing it out so that I have like an hour or two in between to get writing done, or strategy work done, or newsletter time, or whatever it is. Because that will help me. If I have a whole day where I don't have much going on and concrete and planned, I end up wasting and procrastinating. The other thing I do in my week is I set aside 2 days a week that are geared towards writing and traveling and easing into my week. So Mondays and Fridays are my days to sort of ease in and ease out, and to write and get everything that I need to get done, planning, strategy, all that stuff. And Tuesdays, Wednesday, Thursday are my days for client calls, my networking, my teaching, anything that I do, and I really pack it in during that time, and that works really well for me. But I encourage you to think about what works really well for you. What do you need to see in the morning? Maybe it's a picture of something you really like, maybe it's a quote. Start your day with something positive. Sometimes I watch TED Talks, things like that, so that you're starting your day with something that is going to be inspirational.
That's great. So, speaking of inspirational, tell us what the next 6 months looks like for 6 months to live.
Happy to do that, Libby. So the really exciting thing that's happening with 6 months to live right now is it's turning into an online publication. And what that basically means is it's going to have all these different experts and contributors, people that I've met over the years it's starting with, and then would love, if you're interested, there's going to be guest post requirements and all those things. But I realize that, I'm one person. It started this entire movement, which is fantastic, and I'm so excited about that. But it wouldn't be a movement if people didn't decide to follow. Have you seen that TED Talk where the guy is dancing crazily and people slowly start to join? And the guy in the TED Talk basically says, and everyone's dancing crazily at the end of this concert by the end of it. And he says that the real decision maker is the first person that decides to follow the crazy person that's dancing, because you're not a leader if you don't have, I don't really like the term followers, but that's what makes the shift and the change. So the next step for 6 months to live is really bringing in these leaders and these experts in their own fields in health, travel, business, relationships, so that there can be all these different voices about what truly living means. And there can be all these resources for people, so that if they want to know how to travel, that there's my voice, and that there's all these other voices like yours, or like Chris Gullibaloo, or whatever it may be, so that they can have the tools and the resources to live the life they want or to enrich their life, whether that's doing something crazy like, sailing in Mexico, or just, having more love in your life. One of the other things I did was I wrote 168 letters of appreciation for the first 6-month experiment, because I thought if I was going to die, I would want people to know what they meant and why am I waiting. I just sent out some postcards recently. It's nice to just let people know you care about them. And we sort of forget that in sort of the minutia of life, but taking the time to slow down and honor that. So it can be big things or small things.
Um, So I kind of drifted into, I was thinking about the urgency and the time limit that you were talking about before, and I wanted to also leave people with, and when and how we met, and we put together in our class, we put together, you've inspired me, as well, and you, like I said, you're a great storyteller, you have some, really great experiences, and also I think we helped put together or walk through the first 30-day action plan, and getting back to what for the Live Work Anywhere course, and you talked about again, creating urgency and having sort of this plan and taking first steps and putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, rejection therapy. And so I want to encourage people to also take that, the course, and take the 30-day action plan, because here's a product right here, Jackie
Yeah, that
Boone.
was very helpful. It was very helpful to feel accountable. You're 70% more likely to follow through on what you say you're going to do if you've told other people and you're held accountable.
That's great.
So that's one of the reasons why I tell people what my dreams are, because then I have to do them.
That's true. Or run and hide. That's great. Well, thanks for all your great advice, Jackie Boone,
Yeah,
everybody.
thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Have a wonderful day. Bye
Thank
from
you.
Alaska.
Bye.
Bye. Hang on. Let me stop the recording.